Okay, so next we'll move to the foster department, which I'm sure everyone has heard of. Again, this could be divided into dogs versus cats. They could have one person running the whole situation or a team running the whole situation. The foster department usually consists of some kind of manager, coordinator, and then possibly assistants. And they help recruit fosters, place animals in homes, and then do any kind of follow-up, and they're there as a resource for any kind of questions that fosters might have. They also help make sure those animals move through the system, so that might be coordinating them to come back for surgery, come back for any kind of medical checkup, come back to see if there's any kind of check-in they need to do with the behavior team, and then also coordinating with potential adopters. So a lot of fosters, especially like behavior ones that are shut down, they're making progress in the home. We don't want to bring them back into the shelter to get adopted because that's just going to make them regress. So we want them to be adopted from one home into the next so that it's a smooth transition, but normally they might have to just come to the shelter for an hour to meet that adopter. So they will kind of help coordinate all of that with the fosters. Foster needs that you're gonna find at a shelter are going to be pregnant moms or moms that have just had their babies, babies without any moms, and then behavior cases and also various medical cases. As the clinic, we might ask for foster for a variety of reasons. Maybe someone's not eating and we want to see if it is just the environment that they're so shut down they don't want to eat. Maybe they have some kind of medical issue that we want to monitor and try to get stable before we make them available. We can also have them go out of the shelter to recover from things that are exacerbated by stress. So upper respiratory infections, especially in cats, are notorious for just flaring up from stress of the shelter environment. So if we can get them out of that, it's going to clear up much quicker. And then we also might put animals in fosters just for monitoring because we might be suspicious of some medical issues. So if they are urinating more frequently or they might be having seizures or something like that. So there's a lot of ways that medical uses the foster department outside of just pregnant moms and babies and, you know, neonates that might need bottle fed or caring for like more consistently around the clock. One of the biggest things that foster does is deal with litters of puppies and kittens. So they are making sure that they are on a good vaccine regimen. They're getting their deworming protocol and making sure they come in for surgery and then go out to adoptions as quick as possible. A lot of shelters will have multiple locations, and then some of those locations you might see in like malls, or they might be the ones filling kennels in like PetSmarts and things. And so a lot of puppies and kittens are gonna go there because there are so many of them. So foster is huge in, you know, making sure all of these huge litters are getting through the system and getting what they need. Foster is really just so important because, like I said, there are a lot of rescues that are just solely foster based, which is great because then you don't even have the shelter environment as a, you know, player in this situation. Fosters are really huge and coordinating all of it is a feat. And so having that department dedicated to that is a really huge lifesaver. Next, we're gonna go to admissions and intake. So some places, admissions and intake are going to be one department with maybe a different name, but sometimes they are separate. Usually admissions is kind of another form of a guest service, so it's going to be mostly like a front desk area. They might be in a different location than like the adoptions front area. So admissions usually serves anyone bringing in animals to the shelter. So that could be like a Good Samaritan finding an animal running loose or on the side of the road. They're also going to process any kind of owner surrenders, and then they are going to help the people who are trying to reclaim their animal for whatever reason it was in the shelter. So whether it was lost and it ended up in the shelter and the owner came and is going to reclaim it, or if it was seized for any reason, then they're going to work with those people outside of animal control that to like help make sure all the paperwork's done, make sure any fees are paid, and then make sure they understand any medical care that like we may have found while they were in our care. They're gonna make sure they're aware of those things. So I mentioned owner surrenders. There are a variety of reasons that a person might choose to surrender their animal to an animal shelter. One of the biggest things that admissions ends up doing is helping talk with those owners to figure out what the situation is, to see if they can provide any additional resources to help them keep their animal in their home. So sometimes it might just be like, I can't afford food for them for this month. We have a ton of donated food, like they will give you a bag. They might not have adequate shelter for them outside, so they might give them some kind of doghouse with water bowls and things like that. So there are a huge amount of shelters putting in new programs to help keep animals in their homes. I've even worked at a shelter where the owner is moving and they can't take their animal with them, and the admissions counselors will help them look for housing that will allow whatever kind of pet they have. So there are a huge amount of programs in place across shelters in the US. It's really aimed at, keeping animals where they are, not bringing them into the shelter and possibly causing more problems. So on the other side of that, intake is more of the work with the physical animal. Those departments will normally do a basic physical exam. They're going to look for anything out of the ordinary or any kind of medical concern that might be more dire that it needs to come to the clinic right away. If it's just like, oh, there's a mass here or their teeth are really bad, they're just gonna note that in the chart. Then they're going to be responsible for giving them their vaccines, starting them on deworming protocol, and making sure what their microchip status is, recording all of their physical characteristics, and getting all of that into the system. They're also usually responsible for initial blood screening tests. So these blood tests are really, really simple, and they screen for things like heartworm, Lyme disease, feline leukemia, feline immunodeficiency virus, or FIV. Generally, they're going to run those initial screenings so we know if there's anything not obvious that we need to deal with. And then they're also usually responsible for the organization of all the animals in the shelter. So that's like where animals are going to go, what kennel they're going to go to, who they're by. Some places have specific rooms for puppies and some for by quarantine cases and things like that. So they are really usually responsible for all of the organization and the flow in the shelter. Now, some places have their own little department that is just like a flow department, and then sometimes it's on intake or admissions. Okay, next we'll talk about my department, which is medical. So I have seen so many different ways of organizing the medical department. So generally speaking, medical consists of veterinarians, vet techs and vet assistants, administrative assistants, clinic managers, medical directors. They'll usually have their own animal care team as well. So I've been in a lot of different shelters, and some of them will have like a team of vets and techs doing everything, and then there will be some that have like a team of vet and techs for this and a team of vets and techs for this, and it could go as far as a different team for each service that shelter offers. So like a different vet and different support staff for the foster department, a different vet and support staff for admissions, and then different techs for traumas, shelter surgeries, like spay and neuters, specialty surgeries, parvo, bottle babies. So administrative assistants in clinics also field calls from like fosters or adopters with medical concerns. Clinic managers obviously handle staffing and scheduling and inventory, and then medical directors are the ones who are going to be making big decisions and writing protocols and things like that to help make the clinics run the most efficiently as possible. They're also going to be making decisions with whatever kind of situations might come up. So they might be involved in euthanasia decisions, reaching out to rescues and things like that. I'm going to list some things that are expected of the medical department from the day-to-day, just to give you a better understanding of everything that happens in a shelter clinic. So they have to complete a wide variety of surgeries every single day. Now, some clinics might not do surgery every day, but it just kind of depends on what their staffing is like. So those could be spay neuters, dentals, amputations, mass removals, anything and everything. Techs in the clinic are responsible for administering different medications and treatments, and that's multiple times a day. They're expected to triage and treat any traumas that come in or any new intakes from admissions. This could include anything from those that have been hit by cars, attack wounds, gunshot wounds, hyperthermia, hypothermia, anything like that. They need to be able to complete appointments with fosters and adopters. They complete euthanasias. They ensure all the medical records are up to date at any given point throughout the day. Ensure their work environment is clean and stocked and ready for whatever else is going to come through the door. So it's very rare that an animal does not pass through the medical department at some point during their time in the shelter. A lot of shelters are putting into place that they need some kind of exam by a vet at their time in the shelter. So they might not even be able to be made available for adoption until they get that exam. So medical is really important for moving animals through the shelter. If you didn't have a medical department, the amount of animals available for you to adopt out would be cut way down. And then if you didn't have a medical department and you had to go to a private clinic to get all of that done, that time is going to just stretch and stretch and stretch. So it's really essential having that medical department and having it adequately staffed to make sure all the animals are moving through in a timely fashion. And then on top of all that, some shelters also have vet services that they offer at a low cost rate to the public. So that is a whole other team under the medical department. So the final department we're going to look at a little more in depth is animal control. So you really only have this department if you work in a municipal shelter, although some nonprofits are kind of making their own form of animal control. They have their own trucks and their own staff, and they're trained like animal control officers, and then they're performing all those duties in the same way. They're just bringing the animals to a nonprofit shelter instead of a municipal one. So this department normally consists of some kind of dispatchers to field calls from the public, and then animal control officers who go out in the field. So officers are going to respond to calls. Most often call that you're going to get is a dog running loose, but often they can be called for injured animals, those trapped in various places like between walls and things like that, or animals attacking people or other animals. They might also be called if someone thinks an animal might have been abandoned in a yard, or they might be called for concerns from people. If they see an animal has been outside in 100-degree weather for over a couple hours, they might call animal control. If they see that they don't have water, if it's snowing and there's nowhere for the animal to go, they might be called for things like that. So animal control is also responsible for pursuing legal action against potential cases of animal abuse and neglect. And then they also are responsible for recording any kind of bite incident. So all shelters have their basic administrative departments as well. So that's including your CEO, HR, payroll, marketing, PR, things like that. You also have a volunteer department, and they are responsible for recruiting volunteers, training them, and then making sure that they are doing, fulfilling needs across the shelter. So they can be responsible for coming up with new programs, finding different ways that volunteers can help across the organization. So a lot of shelters have also kind of made up their own departments. Some of the ones I've seen have been rescue coordinators. So those are the point person for partners for the shelter. So they're gonna work with other partners to kind of trade animals or take animals to help with the capacity across their community. Some will even have grooming departments where animals can get bathed and shaved and any kind of medicated baths. Most shelters are also going to have some kind of education department So this is going to be more responsible for reaching out to the public, educating people about the services that they offer and the importance of medical care. Education is usually responsible for coordinating like community vaccine clinics, and then also they could be involved in organizing events like 5Ks and bar crawls. And even if you are working in a shelter with a unique department, you are going to get so much experience with just the welfare system in general that anywhere you go, you're going to find a role needing to be filled. So I hope this gives you a better idea of how an animal shelter runs and everything that goes into it, all the teams working together to get these animals into their forever homes. It really takes so many hands to get an animal into a forever home that it's not just the person adopting, it's everyone coming together to give the animal its best chance and be its advocate. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. Again, I'd love to continue this conversation. Let me know if there are any unique roles that you've noticed in your local animal shelter. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.